island. Um, we have to learn from each other, and there's no secrets in education. Anyone that feels like they can't share things out, they're not helping their colleagues or students. And so I want to give you guys a few minutes to talk about some things that you have done or you plan to do in any of these areas. You don't have to answer each of them, but anything or something you've seen on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, you feel like that you could use. And so we'll take the next few minutes to go ahead and do that. And then if you put your name down, or even if you don't, I am going to ask you to kind of share out some things that you have seen so we can build this toolbox for our students. I'll give you about 1 more minute. All right. So what we'll do is we'll start from left to right, so internet access, and we'll go down. And when I call that topic, if you are willing to share, please, no raised hand or anything. Just go ahead and speak out. And if you can just share like where you're from or your first name or something, just so I know how to recognize you, but we'll start with internet access. So one thing real quick, and I'm not going to talk probably after this one, but my local library, like I said, we're kind of rural. We are rural. We don't think we are, but we are. We don't have a Chick-fil-A or Starbucks, so we're rural. But the library, one of the libraries, they offer, of course, they know families might sit out in the parking lot and use it, but they've offered shaded spaces outside of their library with some water and snacks. So if people do have to work out there, they can. And I just think that although that is not as nice as working from home, it's really hard to do a computer access in a car, especially if you don't have air. So speaking from experience, it's just nice sometimes to be outside of the car. But for them to set up that space and it's in a shaded area that you can do that and still be safe, I think is a wonderful thing. Would anybody else like to share anything under internet access?
Yeah, so I had a student that was I wrote it in there that his mom would drive him to a store down the street to get internet when it was class time. So I would like to, if we jump back into virtual learning, collect some resources for the students so that it's not as a burden for the families. I'm not sure what those resources will be here where I am, but hopefully our libraries will do something like that here.
I think that that's amazing. There's Sydney. I worked with Sydney too. But that is, I think even thinking of it that way, like, for some it's all or nothing, but really being flexible in, even when you're in the classroom, what do I need to know that the student knows and how can I get that from them? I think it looks different during this time, but really being flexible as a teacher and knowing like, okay, that is a burden for them. So maybe what I offer will look different. Or, as a teacher, kind of reaching out to the library and saying, hey, like I have a student, just starting the conversation. A lot of times people don't do better because they don't know better. And so one of those things is just calling the library and saying, like, I know there's kids that are doing this, what could we do? Or have you thought about it? And it might be there's a church that's like, I have water bottles and I have seats and we have tables, so it's one of those things that could start a movement. But it just takes a moment of time to talk to someone. So I think just even you, Sydney, thinking about that, it's like a step forward to support that family. Is there anybody else that wants to share anything for internet access before we move to support special needs? All right, so next column, I need someone to speak up about how we have been or you plan to support special need and ELL learners.
My name is Busala. I'm a new teacher support coach at UNC Charlotte. And so just talks over the time with the teachers I've been working with about just collaborating with the general ed teachers. A lot of times we communicate to parents and families in isolation, but I think if they're on the same team, so it won't be overload for the parents getting information and then also being able to integrate those live lessons with the EC teacher or ELL teacher there to support as well.
Agreed. And I think it does take an extra part of it's a lot of collaboration and a lot of conversations. But even if you're going to be team teaching next year, really think about your team and what you're assigning. And are there times that you can work together? Because it is a lot for people to, if we go back to where we were, where the kids are at home and parents are working from home, it's a lot for parents to balance all of that when there's different expectations across. The next one was wraparound services. So I did put this one, let me see, did someone, yeah. So I did put that one in. One of the things that my daughter's elementary school offered was for parents or students to send an email if they felt like the children needed to have just a check-in. And it didn't have to be someone they were already seeing. It could be any kid that was just having some anxiety or stress. And I appreciated that because it really did give the child an opportunity to reach out because it was in their Google homework. But then we got an email as parents that if you wanted to reach out. And I know different school systems have different policies on that, and I get it. But what I want you guys to do, let's be a little revolutionary. So if you go to administration or to someone and they're like, we can't do that. Well, what are we going to do to meet the need? Questions aren't bad. Questions are just, we know there's a need, kids need help. What are we going to do? So if we can't do it this way, don't take that. And I know there's fighters on this conversation because we've talked before. Be that voice of like, be the voice that needs to be heard. Sorry about that. So next, teacher support. Who would like to do, who would like to talk about teacher support? How about whoever put short how-tos on tools? Would you like to share a little more about that?
Yeah, that was me, Vanita. And everyone else. I the short were just, we knew that teachers were being inundated. We all were being inundated with lots of information, some good and but not useful. So curating what was helpful and then creating really short how-to videos to help teachers get right to the thing so that they could use it quickly and save time.
And I think that's great. And guys, if you're doing something and it's working, you've got to share it. And if they don't listen, that's part of people that have a voice. Sometimes you have something. So famous people that have always had a mission and a voice and had thoughts and people didn't bite onto it. Doesn't mean that your ideas aren't great, just means they weren't ready. So make sure that you're sharing those things that work, and know that you don't have to wait for someone to give you permission if you know it's something that could work. The next part's huge for me, just because it's huge for me. I taught kindergarten, and there was no way we'd get through anything if I had kids coming in certain spots. So I had to have plans set aside to get everybody on the same mental, emotional page. Sasha, would you like to talk about your online morning meetings?
Sure. Actually, the online morning meetings came through a PD I went to with my county. It was about social emotional learning in the end of the school year, especially around the pandemic. So we kind of started doing social emotional meetings, and I would present my screen, and there would be a question beforehand, a welcoming question, something for them to brainstorm and think about. Then they would watch a video. And then we discussed some questions about what was happening in that video. And most of the videos were read alouds of social emotional learning books, about how it's okay to make a mistake, or how it's okay to be nervous, what to do when you are nervous, or what to do if you're angry or upset. And so we would kind of do those. And also another way, I didn't list it here, another way I felt like we checked up on my students, my second grade team personally, is we would do Fun Fridays. And so everybody on second grade, we would go on a virtual field trip. And it doesn't seem big to us, but I think it was really impactful for the kids just because they were able to see one another. And they were able to just breathe around each other without thinking about what 2 + 2 or 4 × 4 is. They were just able to have fun with one another and communicate.
And I mean, those are the moments that our kids missed out on. And we did too. Like, we missed out on those moments that kept us engaged in why we do the work that we do, and really helped our kids feel, might get that love and the attention that they're not getting somewhere else. And so just as we move forward in the unknown, which is huge because unknown causes anxiety, we really need to stay focused on the whys behind what we do. And also we need to stay focused on knowing that everybody that's coming to us for, like, you have instruction to do, but everyone's not ready for your instruction. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, that's huge. And I don't think it's because I'm an elementary person. I think it's a huge. You have to know your people and what they're going through. And so really take the time when you're thinking about it. I know there's going to be a big push on academics. What did the kids miss and how can I catch them up? But if you neglect that part of all the things that we don't know that they've seen and heard why they've been away from us, that we were able to catch every day because we saw them every day, and now we haven't seen them. And so some of the things that we might have to work with are going to look different. So please make sure that you are really thinking about the whole child and your whole colleagues, because our colleagues are hurting too. And so this has been a difficult time for us as well. The last one is parent expectations. Whoever wrote that would, oh, okay, that's me, no mic. Okay, I got you. All right, so in the chat, so I'm gonna read, although I'm sure you can read yourself, but Sasha Murphy in Elkin, North Carolina. in Surrey County. So the main goal, she said, was to alleviate stress for parents because they were kicking back on a lot of the things we were doing. This straightforward guide really helped them understand exactly what we wanted because we were given different opportunities for students with different levels of ability. Once they understood exactly what we were asking, they were more on board with what we needed. It took some stress from them, and once they weren't as overwhelmed, they were more willing to build a partnership. Yes, and I think that's the key. I think that's the key everywhere. Traditional learning, virtual learning, a hybrid of it. It's the communication piece. And I think that some of our parents, and on Facebook and Instagram, some of the posts I saw, I think they did exactly what our kids do when they're overwhelmed. They checked out, they ended early, and they said they didn't care. And I think that they modeled for us some of the things that we hear and we see with our kids. And so I think it's huge that we are giving them that communication. And I love that part about having pictures, because as a parent with 2 kids logging into 2 separate programs, a middle schooler and an elementary student at the same time, it was hard to remember what each teacher wanted and how they wanted it. And so I could not help them, or it would cause frustration. And they were moving between my home and their dad's home. So that was already an added, and we're both educators. So it wasn't that we didn't know education. It's like we still couldn't speak the same language. And so really being clear, Sasha, that's huge. And if you can do it as a team, it helps. Your school, your administration might not say that. It might not say, you guys should work as a team, but when you can do, because then there won't be well, my teacher does this and my teacher does that. And then they're fussing and they're not getting the work done. So I think anytime that you could work together on something always makes it better. You will have access to this Padlet. So if you want to come back to it and check over some of the things that were listed, but I really believe that we can learn from each other. So I wanted to put equity in one more time because, let's not lose sight that we have to know that if this was an equitable society, all students would be able to participate and would prosper. And so we as educators have to create these conditions that every student can reach their full potential. We're not saying they're all going to go to Harvard. That's not how we were created, but they should be able to reach their potential. And so we have to create a path from hope to change, because a lot of us hope that things will be better. But as leaders in the school, even if you're in your first, second, third year, it doesn't matter. The main thing is still the main thing. And it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. You did school anyway for 12 plus 4 years, 16. You did school as a student and you saw things that were unequitable. And so when you're thinking about where to start with your district's plan. There's nothing worse than like getting all these great ideas and then being told after you planned everything that at the beginning it was like, are we using Google Hangout or are we using Zoom? And then all the craziness started with Zoom. So people were told not to use Zoom. Go ahead and consult your district's plans. I know they're working on them on what their A, B, and C plan will look like. So you can already kind of have an idea of this is what I need to expect. Talk with your administration and your team. What are their expectations? I know it was really hard for me to coach at one school because they were teaching, they were given a time to teach when the times that I didn't know they were teaching. So like, go ahead and get that in mind. Like if I'm going to be doing instruction and they expect me to do this many hours or whatever, this is what it's going to look like so I can plan my life around it. I really encourage you to develop yourself this summer. It doesn't have to be formal PD. There's a lot of free conferences now because everything's virtual. And so really look at those topics of like, this is something I really want to do a better job on. And I want to do the work for my students. And then not finally, because I think continually through the summer, this is what you need to do is fill your bucket. You will not be good to anyone if you're not taking care of yourself. So if this summer, that means that you're going to be doing these daily walks, or you're going to meditate, or you're going to take Sundays off, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, or I have to take these days off, take them off now. Fill your bucket because we don't know what it will look like and what will be expected from us this fall. I did include some resources. The first link is a link of like all these different resources that talk like online learning in the area of science, social studies. The next one is a link about COVID-19 and just the impact that it's had on our school systems. Wide Open School, I'm not sure if you've seen that yet, but that is a link that you can share with parents as well. So there's parent and family resources as well as for staff. Padlet, I enjoy just because I want to be in participative situations. I don't enjoy this. I'm just telling you, like, it's hard for me because I like to have a conversation with people, and Padlet lets people do that. My daughter's school, they had Fridays, they did a virtual kind of field trip too. But every day they had a Padlet during their Spirit Week towards the end of the year where the kids could put a video up there of them in their spirit wear, whatever the day was. Also in her dual language class, she could type in Spanish a picture of her drinking water, whatever it was asking her to do. And so she enjoyed that because she got to see her friends. And I forgot about how important that was because I have Facebook and Instagram and Marco Polo. So I'm seeing people all the time. And I just kind of forgot that here's my second grader who doesn't have access to social media, who really didn't know this was ever going to happen and isn't able to see those kids that she was used to seeing. This is something to leave with you. It's out of Midwest and Plains Equity Assistance Center. It's just 5 big equity ideas when you're thinking about distant learning in the future. And so the first big idea is just create content with access in mind. So as you're thinking about what you're doing, don't first think about, oh, this would be great on Google, but think about, this is what I want the kids to learn. And then here are the ways that I could get it to them. Applying the UDL principles. So thinking about the traditional forms of engagement and how it would look. I know some people are really hesitant about sharing out their phone numbers. You can have a Google phone number through Gmail. And so that's something in my other work I do as a guardian ad litem. I'm able to text families. I'm able to do voice chats and face chats with those families, and I don't have to worry about it being on my phone. So it looks different, but I'm still getting contact. Consider students equitable access to devices and the internet. That's something like, as you have conversations, I've been a big proponent of our district where my kids go only did technology for middle school and high school. And I just thought that was so unfair to divide it that way. And so they really should have provided technology for our younger ones so they can get faster feedback and they could have access to it as well. So really having those conversations with your school and remember, so what can we do instead? That's a good question. And it's not defensive. It's just asking for some guidance on what can we do if we can't do this. Consider the social emotional well-being of your students. And then be creative and have fun. So I saw a lot of flat teacher ideas floating around. And the kids, I know from my daughter, she enjoyed having her flat, Miss Cosme, and she did the TikTok dances with her. And it was like a highlight for her to sit there with this flat Stanley doll and doing these dances with her teacher. But it really, and videotaped it and sent it to her. It was just something that she had this happiness and joy that I hadn't seen in a while. And so really thinking about that when you're doing things with kids. Have fun still, because the fun that you might have brought every day isn't available. So as I said earlier, equity does involve having high hopes for all students. And so we really need to want the best for our students. And that is all I have for today. Dr. Granger, is there anything that you would like to add?
Sorry, you think you get the mute kind of figured out. I'd love to open it up. I mean, I think we have just a couple minutes. Your presentation has been really thought-provoking, and I'd love to see if there are any questions from anyone. Either you can put them in the chat box or just unmute yourself and then ask Angela. I'm going to ask something real quick. You said something about thinking about whole colleagues. And I think that's a piece that we forget about is the teachers, the colleagues that we're working with. So do you have some things maybe that you utilized in the spring as you were providing coaching? Some things that we might think about for fall, no matter what we look like in the fall?
I know what I tried to do, and my teachers I work with, if you're up here, you can speak in, chime in anytime. What I tried to do is meet them where they were. So I didn't want to be one more thing. And I think sometimes that's a hard walk when you're working with other people. You have deadlines, you have things to be done, but also like extending that grace that I've spoken so much about. Um, I think that's key. And so one thing, I saw a great quote online about how you've done all these things and you're not getting responses from students. That's very frustrating. You've reached out, you've asked for these things, and you're not hearing back from them. Being okay with that. And I think when we're talking about being okay, it's just you can do all that you can do. You can't be Superwoman, can't be Superman. And I think it's really hard as a beginning teacher because you already feel at a disadvantage of I don't know if I'm doing everything I should be doing. But you've got to rest easy in I've done all that I can do at this point. And I think when working with colleagues, Vanita has been great with me. We've been working on a podcast. It's always before we get to work, because sometimes I'm always about the work. Before we get to work, it's like, hey, how are you doing? And I think that's a question that needs to be asked. Dr. Washington does it with me at Fayetteville State. It's like, how are you as a person before what you can do for me? And I think checking in on your colleagues this summer, or if you have new people coming in, this is the season, really reaching out to them and letting them know, like, I care about you as a person. And if that means doing a Netflix watch party or we do Marco Polo, me and my friends, just so we're not texting each other, we can see each other's emotion, because that really helps ground us in our conversations. Because when you send texts, sometimes they come off a little different. But when you can see somebody when they're talking to you, you're like, okay, I see that she's not saying she's hurt, but I can see it. And so really working hard on that, because in the end, it's your colleagues and you, and you guys are about the same work. So even if you're different, it's about the kids, but you can't do it alone. And if you do it alone, it's going to be a lot harder for you, and it won't be as rich, and you won't be as pushed, and you won't be able to grow.
So good points. I think maintaining that human connection is really important with our colleagues, with our students, and with our families that we work with. So one more question, and then we're going to have to close the session so that we can transition back to the main room. So Sasha Murphy asked, is there any way we can help the material to be retained better? And we're going to have such a big gap, as you mentioned, Angela, between March the 13th and whatever date we go back in August.
And I think that's one of the things I try to do as a parent. I try to push them to do something with what they've learned. And so if they have done a certain thing, I've asked them to do a lot of writing, and not typing, but writing, to build on that. And what you've learned, because my daughter's in some classes right now, my middle schooler, tell me about what you've learned. Talk to me about it, not just like giving it back, but actually applying it. And what is it like? Analogies are huge. So, trying to work with kids on analogy, on like, how does that apply to things that you've done? So we've done a lot of that. And I think one of the things we have to rest into is that kids are learning. They've learned some other skills. And I think if we could really tie that to the things that they have learned, how some things are now a habit of wearing a mask, and how you walk, and how you stay far apart from each other. I think they've learned some skills that it might not fill in an end of grade test, but they've learned some life skills that we can build on. So really trying to take them from where they are. And I just keep the main thing, kids will read every day. They're writing every day. And they're doing some Spanish on Duolingo. And so I'm the mean parent that makes them do that every day. But I don't care. Reading is reading. And so reading and then talking about what you read. So I think it's just going to be a work in progress. And I don't think any of us have the answers, but I think as long as you're acknowledge, like, I know that there's probably some things that we taught in the spring that we can't assume every kid knows. So we need to reassess it in the fall. That's the first step.
So when you're ready, I have 2 Grangers. I'd be happy to send you for the Angela Hill homeschool.
I'm sure they'll love to come, but then they'll be ready to be going back, and then I'll have to. So we can try it, but I know mine are ready to peace out of this Hill house right now.
So I just want to say thank you to Angela Hill. This has been a really awesome session. I was taking lots of notes. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the participation from those of us who were in the session. Because of the way the WebEx runs, I'm going to have to close the room. So I see Laura here for the panel discussion. I'm going to close it down. I'm going to end the meeting, and then I'll open it back up in about a minute or 30 seconds to a minute. So I thank you. Please come back for the panel discussion. We are super excited to hear from these VTs. So see you in a few minutes.
Bye-bye.